welcome back. Or perhaps, if this is your first time joining us, welcome home. You have stepped into a sanctuary, a quiet room away from the noise of the world. Here at the Elevated Within, we do not just skim the surface of our human experience. We dive into the depths. We look at the unspoken shadows, the quiet anxieties, and the invisible threads that pull at our minds and hearts. I am honored to walk this path with you, not as a teacher standing on a pedestal, but as a brother, a fellow traveler who has walked through these very same valleys. Before we begin today's journey, I invite you to take a brief moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Do this not as a favor to an algorithm, but as a tangible, physical commitment to your own growth. Let that small action be a declaration to your subconscious that you are ready to elevate your awareness, to claim your emotional sovereignty, and to stop accepting anything less than what your soul requires. The science of the intermittent hook. Today, we are going to talk about a very specific, very modern kind of starvation. We are going to dismantle a psychological trap that is so subtle, so elegantly disguised as romance or connection, that millions of us fall into it without even realizing the cage doors have closed. We are going to talk about breadcrumbing, and more importantly, we are going to talk about reclaiming your emotional power from the people who keep you waiting. Have you ever found yourself staring at a glowing rectangle of glass, your entire mood, your entire sense of self-worth, hinging on whether a specific name appears on your screen? You know the feeling. The sudden drop in your stomach when the hours tick by in silence. The desperate, exhausting mental gymnastics you perform to justify their absence. They must be busy. They are probably just stressed at work. Maybe their phone died. And then, just as you are about to finally let go, just as you are about to step out of the fog and reclaim your dignity, a ping, a single message, a low-effort, casual check-in, a meme, a flame emoji on your story, a simple, "Hey, thinking of you." Instantly, the starvation ends. A wave of profound relief washes over you. Your heart rate accelerates. The fog lifts. You feel seen again. You feel alive again. But my friend, what you are feeling is not love. What you are feeling is not genuine connection. What you are feeling is the exact neurochemical rush of a gambler who has just hit a small payout on a slot machine after losing their life savings. You are trapped in the Dopamine Casino, and the house is always winning. To understand how breadcrumbing paralyzes us, we must first look at the science of the intermittent hook. In the mid-20th century, a behavioral psychologist named B.F. Skinner conducted a series of experiments that would forever change our understanding of motivation and addiction. Skinner placed animals, rats and pigeons, inside specialized boxes equipped with levers. In the first phase of the experiment, every time the rat pressed the lever, it received a food pellet. Continuous reinforcement. The rat learned the system quickly. When it was hungry, it pressed the lever. When it was full, it ignored the lever. There was no obsession. There was no anxiety. The relationship between the action and the reward was predictable, stable, and secure. Then Skinner changed the rules. He introduced what he called intermittent reinforcement. Now, when the rat pressed the lever, it did not always get a pellet. Sometimes it had to press the lever 3 times, sometimes 10 times. Sometimes the pellet came immediately. Sometimes it took an hour of frantic pressing. The reward became entirely unpredictable, sporadic, random. The results were astonishing and deeply unsettling. Under continuous reinforcement, the animals were calm. But under intermittent reinforcement, the animals became obsessed. They would press the lever frantically, continuously, even to the point of exhaustion and starvation. The uncertainty did not make them lose interest. The uncertainty created a profound behavioral addiction. The very unpredictability of the reward caused a massive spike in dopamine, the brain's reward and motivation neurotransmitter, far higher than when the reward was guaranteed. This, my brother, my sister, is exactly what is happening in your brain when you are being breadcrumbed. The person on the other side of that screen is the lever. Their attention, their validation, their affection is the food pellet. When you first met, perhaps there was a period of continuous reinforcement. Frequent texts, deep conversations, clear plans. You felt secure. But then the rules changed. The attention became sporadic. The texts grew shorter. The silences longer. Now, you never know when the next pellet is coming. Every time they pull away, your brain registers a deficit. It craves the equilibrium it once had. And every time they finally reach out, throwing you a tiny, meaningless crumb of attention, your brain floods with dopamine. You are experiencing the high of the intermittent hook. You are addicted to the inconsistency. You are addicted to the relief from the anxiety that they themselves created. It is a masterful, devastating loop of emotional manipulation, and it works flawlessly on the human nervous system. We must deeply understand the power of the word maybe. The human brain is an exquisite problem-solving machine. It evolved to recognize patterns, to seek certainty, and to close open loops. When we are faced with a clear, definitive no, it hurts. A rejection is painful. A breakup is devastating, but a no provides closure. A no allows the nervous system to begin the grieving process. It allows the brain to close the file, to heal the wound, and eventually to move forward into new territories. A maybe, however, is a virus in the system. Maybe is an open loop that refuses to close. When someone breadcrumbs you, they are effectively trapping you in a perpetual state of maybe. They are not in your life, but they refuse to fully exit it. They give you just enough attention to keep you hoping, but never enough to actually satisfy your emotional needs. Evolutionarily speaking, uncertainty is dangerous. To our primitive brains, not knowing what is going to happen next is a matter of life and death. Therefore, the brain prioritizes solving the maybe over almost everything else. It dedicates vast amounts of subconscious processing power to analyzing the situation, trying to predict the outcome, and scanning the environment for clues. This is why you cannot stop thinking about them. This is why your mind constantly loops back to their last message, dissecting every word, every punctuation mark, looking for a hidden meaning that promises security. Your subconscious is locked in a waiting state, hypervigilant, unable to rest, unable to focus on your own life, your own goals, or your own peace. The maybe is a ghost that haunts your mental architecture, demanding attention but never offering resolution. It is crucial to define the modern digital symptoms of this phenomenon, so we can drag it out of the shadows and examine it under the harsh light of reality. We must differentiate breadcrumbing from genuine busyness and from straightforward ghosting. Ghosting, as cowardly as it may be, is a definitive action. It is a harsh, sudden silence. It is a closed door. Being busy is a temporary state. A person who is genuinely busy but truly values you will communicate that busyness. They will say, "I am overwhelmed this week, but I want to see you on Saturday." They provide a timeline. They provide reassurance. They bridge the gap of their absence with clear, respectful communication. Breadcrumbing is entirely different. Breadcrumbing is a curated drip feed of low-effort attention designed to keep you on the hook, without requiring any real investment on their part. It is the illusion of presence, masking the reality of absence. What does it look like in our digital era? It is the person who takes 3 days to reply to a thoughtful message, but is the first to watch every single one of your Instagram stories within minutes of you posting them. They are watching you from the shadows, ensuring you know they are there, but refusing to step into the light and engage. It is the midnight, "Hey, how have you been?" text that arrives just as you were finally starting to forget them. only to be followed by another 48 hours of silence when you reply. It is the random sending of a meme or a reel without any accompanying conversation, a lazy, zero-effort way to insert themselves back into your notifications and trigger your dopamine casino. It is making vague, non-committal plans. We should totally get together soon. Let's grab a drink sometime. Sometime. Soon. Words that sound like a promise, but function as a stalling tactic. They are securing their real estate in your mind without ever having to pay the mortgage of actual effort, consistency, or emotional availability. They are keeping you in their orbit as an option, a backup plan, an ego boost. They are feeding off your availability, your prompt replies, your eagerness, using it to validate their own desirability while giving you absolutely nothing of substance in return. You are a book they have placed on a shelf. They have no intention of reading you right now, but they don't want anyone else to check you out of the library either. We must look at this with sober, unclouded eyes. This is not a romantic mystery. This is not a grand, complicated love story of two star-crossed souls trying to find the right timing. This is operant conditioning. This is emotional starvation masquerading as a diet. When you sit there, analyzing a 3-word text message for an hour, trying to decode the level of affection hidden behind a specific emoji, you are entirely disconnected from your own power. You are outsourcing your emotional regulation to someone who treats your heart like a casual hobby. You are allowing the most precious resources you possess, your time, your focus, your energetic bandwidth, to be siphoned away by a phantom. In recognizing the science of the intermittent hook, in understanding the mechanics of the dopamine casino, we take the first critical step toward freedom. We demystify the behavior. We strip away the romantic illusion and expose the cold psychological reality underneath. It is not that you are weak. It is that your nervous system has been hijacked by a perfectly calibrated mechanism of uncertainty. But awareness alone is not enough. Understanding the trap is only the beginning. Now that we have mapped the anatomy of this starvation, we must look deeply at what this process is actually costing you. We must examine the invisible toll it is taking on your mind, your body, and your future. Because the true danger of breadcrumbing is not just what they are doing to you, it is what they are preventing you from doing for yourself. The cost of deciphering silence. We must now turn our gaze to the ledger of your life and examine the staggering invisible currency you are spending. We are not talking about money. We are talking about something infinitely more valuable, something you can never earn back once it is spent, your cognitive energy and your precious finite attention. This is the true cost of deciphering silence. Imagine your mind as a highly advanced smartphone. When you wake up in the morning, your battery is at 100%. This battery powers your career, your passions, your friendships, your physical health, and your spiritual growth. It is the fuel for your actualization. Now, imagine opening an application on that phone, an application that you cannot see, but that runs continuously in the background. It never closes. It never stops refreshing. It is constantly searching for a signal, pinging a tower that rarely responds. How quickly would your battery drain? How sluggish would the rest of your phone become? This is precisely what happens to your cognitive bandwidth when you are trapped in the intermittent reinforcement loop of breadcrumbing. You are running a massive, high-drain application in the background of your psyche. Think about the sheer volume of mental energy you have wasted staring at a 3-word text message. You become a forensic analyst of your own digital life. You dissect the punctuation. Why did they use a period at the end of that sentence? Does that mean they are angry? You analyze the timing. It took them exactly 14 hours and 22 minutes to reply to my question. Should I wait 15 hours to text back so I do not look desperate? You take screenshots of agonizingly vague interactions and send them to your most trusted friends, forming an emergency council to decode a message that, in truth, contains absolutely no depth whatsoever. You are doing the emotional labor for two people. You are building an entire narrative architecture out of thin air, trying to construct a bridge of meaning over a chasm of their indifference, and this labor is utterly exhausting. The cognitive load required to hold multiple contradictory realities in your mind. They like me, versus they are ignoring me. They are just busy, versus they do not care, creates a state of profound psychological dissonance. When your mind is entirely occupied with the task of interpreting their silence, you have nothing left for yourself. You enter a room, but you are not fully in the room. A part of your awareness is anchored to the phone in your pocket. You sit down to do deep, meaningful work, but your focus shatters every time the screen illuminates. The breadcrumber does not even need to be present to control your environment. Their absence is so loud, so demanding of interpretation, that it completely colonizes your mental real estate. You are paying rent in your own mind to a ghost. This brings us to one of the most dangerous and misunderstood elements of this entire dynamic, the paralyzing agent of hope. From the time we are children, we are taught that hope is a virtue. We are conditioned to believe that holding on to hope is a sign of strength, resilience, and romantic devotion. We romanticize the narrative of the patient lover who waits, who endures, who fights for the connection until the other person finally sees their worth. But my friend, I must tell you a difficult truth. In the context of breadcrumbing, hope is not a virtue. Hope is a poison. Hope is the very mechanism that keeps the cage door locked. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once famously wrote that hope is the worst of all evils, because it prolongs the torment of man. When someone is feeding you crumbs, they are weaponizing your own hope against you. They are providing just enough raw material for your imagination to build a beautiful, reciprocal future that will never actually materialize. Hope, in this scenario, acts as a potent sedative. It numbs you to the harsh, unacceptable reality of the present moment by promising a hypothetical future that makes the current starvation bearable. You tell yourself, if I just hold on a little longer, if I am just a little more understanding, if I just prove my loyalty, they will change. The potential is there. But you cannot have a relationship with potential. You cannot build a home on the foundation of who someone might become on a Tuesday in 3 years if they finally decide to process their emotional baggage. You can only interact with who they are demonstrating themselves to be, right here, right now. When you anchor yourself to the mirage of a breadcrumber's potential, hope paralyzes your forward momentum. It prevents you from moving toward healthy, reciprocal connections. Think of the opportunity cost. Think of the magnificent, wholehearted people you may have overlooked, dismissed, or entirely failed to notice because your emotional bandwidth was entirely consumed by someone who cannot even offer you a consistent good morning. You do not build an oasis because you are too busy walking toward a mirage. Hope keeps your eyes fixed on the horizon of a barren desert, ensuring you never turn around to see the fertile ground that lies in the other direction. It keeps you waiting by a locked door, entirely blind to the open windows all around you. To fully grasp the severity of this trap, we must move beyond the realm of thoughts and emotions and look at the hard biological reality of what is happening inside your physical body. The cost of deciphering silence is not just psychological, it is profoundly physiological. We must discuss the cortisol cocktail. The human nervous system is an ancient mechanism. It evolved over millions of years in environments where the primary threats to our survival were immediate and physical. In his groundbreaking work on stress, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, neuroendocrinologist Robert Sapolsky explains a fundamental difference between how animals and humans process danger. When a zebra is chased by a lion on the savannah, its nervous system triggers a massive, instantaneous stress response. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis activates. The bloodstream floods with adrenaline and cortisol. Heart rate spikes, blood pressure skyrockets, and energy is diverted from non-essential functions like digestion and immune response straight to the muscles. The zebra runs for its life. 3 minutes later, the event is over. The zebra either escapes or it is eaten. If it escapes, its nervous system rapidly downregulates. The cortisol recedes. The zebra goes back to peacefully grazing, the trauma fully discharged from its body. Humans, however, possess a highly developed prefrontal cortex. We have the unique, agonizing ability to generate a physiological stress response purely by thinking about a threat. We can turn on the exact same life-or-death biological alarm bells as the zebra running from the lion, simply by anticipating social rejection or waiting for a text message. Evolutionarily, to be isolated or abandoned by the tribe meant certain death. Therefore, your primitive brain interprets the breadcrumber's silence not as a modern dating annoyance, but as a literal threat to your survival. When the hours stretch into days and you are left in a state of high-alert uncertainty, your system is continuously engaged. Your brain is signaling that the lion is in the grass and it might strike at any moment. You are marinating in a chronic, low-grade cortisol cocktail. This is why the emotional starvation of breadcrumbing manifests as physical symptoms. This is why you cannot sleep deeply, your mind racing the moment your head hits the pillow. This is why you experience that hollow, gnawing sensation in your stomach, a disruption of your digestive system caused by the continuous diversion of blood flow. This is why you feel a persistent, unexplained fatigue, brain fog, and a heightened state of irritability. Your body is biologically exhausted from fighting a phantom war. The profound cruelty of intermittent reinforcement is that the person causing the stress is also the only source of relief. When they finally text you back, the lion disappears. The threat of abandonment is temporarily neutralized. The sudden drop in cortisol, coupled with the immediate spike in dopamine, creates an overwhelming rush of relief. You mistake this biological relief for love. You mistake the sudden cessation of pain for profound joy. But true peace is not the temporary absence of anxiety. True connection does not require your nervous system to be held hostage. When you live in this cycle of high cortisol panic followed by dopamine-fueled relief, you slowly lose your baseline of normalcy. Your nervous system becomes dysregulated. You become so accustomed to the chaos, so addicted to the dramatic biochemical swings of the relationship that a healthy, consistent, predictable partner starts to feel boring. You begin to equate anxiety with passion. You start to believe that if your heart is not racing with terror and uncertainty, it must not be real love. This physiological rewiring is the darkest consequence of deciphering silence. It corrupts your internal compass. It trains your body to crave the very poison that is destroying its equilibrium. Listen to me closely. Your energy, your attention, your hope, and your physical health are finite, sacred resources. They are the building blocks of your destiny. When you allow someone to drain these resources through the manipulative drip feed of breadcrumbing, you are not just losing a potential relationship, you are losing yourself. You are actively participating in the diminishment of your own life force. We must stop romanticizing the waiting. We must stop glorifying the endurance of mistreatment. It is time to calculate the exact cost of this dynamic and realize that the price of their sporadic validation is entirely too high. You cannot afford to spend another ounce of your cognitive bandwidth decoding the silence of someone who does not value the sound of your voice. You must recognize that your hope has been weaponized, anchoring you to a phantom while the real world passes you by. And you must acknowledge the violence this uncertainty is inflicting upon your nervous system, keeping you in a state of chronic, exhausting survival mode when you were built to thrive. The illusion is perfectly constructed, but it is still just an illusion. The power they hold over you is entirely reliant on your willingness to keep playing the game. Your willingness to keep pulling the lever, hoping for a different result. But the game is rigged. The casino always wins. The only way to stop losing is to step away from the table. The only way to reclaim your power is to recognize the mechanisms of the trap and make the conscious, radical decision to shatter the loop entirely. Breaking the reinforcement loop. We have mapped the architecture of your starvation. We have calculated the agonizing physiological and cognitive costs of deciphering their silence. Now, we must undertake the profound work of extraction. To dismantle a prison that is entirely psychological, you cannot use physical tools. You must use a higher state of consciousness. You must elevate your vantage point. The transition from victim of the dopamine casino to the sovereign architect of your own peace begins with a fundamental shift in how you process reality. It begins with the practice of radical observation. For so long, your mind has been trapped in the realm of potential. Human beings are, by our very nature, deeply romantic creatures. We possess a beautiful, tragic flaw. We look at the people we desire, not as they are, but as the magnificent masterpiece they could be if only they healed their wounds, if only they realized our worth, if only the timing was right. You have been acting as a sculptor, standing before a block of marble, imagining the breathtaking statue hidden within. But the harsh, unromantic truth of the breadcrumber is that they are not a block of marble waiting to be carved. They are simply dust, scattered by the wind, incapable of holding a solid shape in your life. Radical observation is the deliberate, disciplined practice of stepping out of the emotional arena and taking a seat in the observer's balcony. It requires you to stop asking the agonizing, endless, why? Why are they doing this? Why don't they care? Why did they text me and then disappear? Asking why assumes that there is a deep, complex, hidden meaning behind their behavior. It flatters them. It grants them a psychological depth they simply do not possess. Instead of asking why, radical observation asks what. What are the facts? What are the observable data points? You must become a dispassionate scientist of their behavior. You strip away the narrative, the hope, and the romanticization, and you look exclusively at the pattern of their inconsistency. When you do this, a miraculous transformation occurs. The person who once seemed like a mysterious, complicated puzzle suddenly becomes staggeringly predictable. The pattern emerges with absolute clarity, 3 days of silence. A sudden, low-effort meme. A brief burst of dopamine. A vague promise of future plans. Another 4 days of silence. The pattern is the person. The inconsistency is not a symptom of their busy schedule. The inconsistency is their entire character. The sporadic attention is not a mistake. It is the fundamental operating system of how they relate to you. When you track the pattern instead of the potential, the illusion shatters. You realize you are not waiting for a soulmate to finally wake up. You are interacting with a highly predictable mechanism of low investment. And predictability, my friend, is the ultimate antidote to the dopamine loop. Your brain only spikes dopamine in the presence of uncertainty. Once you observe the pattern so clearly that you can predict their next disappearance before it even happens, the game becomes boring. The magic trick is revealed. The casino lights shut off. The breadcrumber loses their mystique, and with it, their power over your nervous system. Armed with this radical clarity, we must now address the battlefield itself, your digital environment. We exist in a hyper-connected era, and as we navigate the landscape of 2026, our digital boundaries are just as critical, if not more so, than our physical ones. You cannot heal in the same environment that is making you sick. You must reclaim your digital space, but you must do so with strategic precision. For years, the universal advice for dealing with toxic or manipulative connections has been the absolute, dramatic severance. The block. We have been taught that blocking someone across all platforms is the ultimate assertion of power. But in the specific, nuanced dynamic of breadcrumbing, blocking is often a strategic error. To understand why, you must understand the ego of the breadcrumber. They thrive on the knowledge that they affect you. They feed on the certainty that they hold real estate in your mind. When you angrily block them, you are sending a very loud, very clear message. You are telling them, "Your behavior has hurt me so deeply, and your presence is so disruptive to my peace that I must build a massive, impenetrable wall to keep you out." While a block may feel temporarily empowering, it is ultimately a reaction. And a reaction proves that they still hold power over your emotional state. Furthermore, blocking often triggers what we call the pursuit reflex in highly manipulative individuals. When their supply of validation is suddenly and aggressively cut off, their ego panics. The game is interrupted. They may find secondary ways to contact you: a different number, an alternate account, an email, feigning concern or confusion, effectively dragging you right back into the chaos. The block becomes a dramatic event that requires maintenance and emotional energy. This is why, in our modern era of digital hygiene, we must elevate our strategy. We move from the loud reaction of the block to the silent, lethal power of the mute. The mute over block strategy is the ultimate manifestation of emotional sovereignty. When you mute someone, you are not building a wall. You are simply turning off their microphone. You remove their ability to trigger your notifications, to pop up on your feed, to intrude upon your peace uninvited. But you do so invisibly. They do not know they have been muted. They can still send their low-effort texts. They can still send their sporadic memes. They can still view your stories. But their actions no longer reach your nervous system. They are relegated to the background noise. They are downgraded from a priority alert to a piece of digital spam that you can check, or completely ignore, on your own terms when your battery is full and your emotional armor is intact. The energetic difference is profound. Blocking is an external action designed to keep someone away. Muting is an internal boundary designed to protect your peace. When you mute a breadcrumber, you are silently communicating the most devastating message possible to their ego, even if they never consciously hear it. You are no longer important enough to require a reaction. You are no longer disruptive enough to warrant a block. You have simply become irrelevant. You reclaim your digital space without the dramatic flair. You lower the emotional temperature of the entire dynamic from a boil to an absolute freeze. You take your power back, quietly, firmly, and irrevocably. Yet even as you observe the pattern and mute their presence, there is one final, incredibly seductive trap waiting for you before you can be truly free. It is the agonizing, deeply human craving for closure. The ego hates an unfinished story. Your mind, having invested so much energy into this person, desperately wants a final chapter. You want to sit them down and explain exactly how their inconsistency made you feel. You want to lay out your meticulously gathered evidence of their disrespect. You want them to look you in the eye, acknowledge your pain, apologize for their behavior, and give you a clear, logical reason for why they could not show up for you. You believe that if you can just get this final conversation, this definitive explanation, the wound will finally heal. This is the closure trap. And it is the most dangerous mechanism of the entire breadcrumbing cycle, because it tricks you into believing that your healing requires their participation. Seeking closure from a breadcrumber is like returning to the person who is starving you and asking them for the final, satisfying meal. They do not have it to give. A person who communicates through silence, manipulation, and sporadic crumbs is fundamentally incapable of offering you the emotional depth, accountability, and clarity required for genuine closure. If you ask them for an explanation, they will not give you a clean break. A clean break would set you free, and losing your validation is the last thing their ego wants. Instead, they will offer you a masterclass in ambiguity. They will say things like, "I'm just in a really weird headspace right now," or "I care about you so much, but I'm just so overwhelmed with work," or the classic, devastating, "You are amazing, and you deserve better than what I can give you right now." Do you see the trap? These statements sound like apologies, but they are actually just higher quality crumbs. They are designed to keep the door propped open. They provide just enough false vulnerability to trigger your empathy, plunging you right back into the hope that one day, when their headspace clears, they will finally be ready for you. Seeking closure does not end the cycle. It restarts the dopamine casino with higher stakes. You must realize that closure is not a gift that someone else hands to you. Closure is not a conversation. Closure is an internal decision. It is an act of radical self-acceptance. You must accept that the disrespect was the closure. The silence was the answer. The inconsistency was the explanation. You do not need them to validate your pain in order for your pain to be real. You do not need them to admit their manipulative behavior in order for you to walk away from it. You take the pen back. You stop waiting for them to write the final sentence of this chapter. You look at the raw data of their behavior. You acknowledge that this connection does not meet your standards for a nourishing, reciprocal relationship, and you close the book yourself. Breaking the reinforcement loop is not a loud, dramatic explosion. It is a quiet, profound withdrawal of your energy. It is the realization that you have been fighting a war against a phantom, and the only way to win is to drop your weapons and walk off the battlefield entirely. You observe the pattern until it bores you. You mute the noise until it fades into nothingness. And you abandon the desperate quest for their explanation, choosing instead the unshakable certainty of your own worth. The chains are broken not by force, but by the elevated awareness that the cage was never actually locked. Cultivating radical self-containment. We have severed the external tethers. The notifications are muted. The chaotic pattern of their presence has been fully exposed, and the desperate, agonizing search for closure has been abandoned, but the withdrawal remains. When you finally disconnect from the intermittent reinforcement loop, you are left in a sudden, echoing silence. For weeks, months, perhaps even years, your entire emotional ecosystem was organized around their unpredictable gravity. Now, there is a void. The phantom notifications still echo in your mind. The urge to check your screen still twitches in your fingers. This is the most critical juncture of your transformation. This is where we must undertake the profound work of redirecting the gaze. For so long, your eyes have been fixed outward. You have been a sentry standing on the walls of your own mind, staring intensely into the distance, waiting for a messenger that rarely arrived. Your locus of control was entirely externalized. Your joy, your sorrow, your anxiety, and your relief were entirely dependent on the actions of someone who was barely even present. To reclaim your emotional sovereignty, we must turn to the ancient wisdom of the Stoics. Over 2,000 years ago, philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius built an invincible psychological fortress based on one fundamental principle: the dichotomy of control. Epictetus taught that the chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that we can say clearly to ourselves which are externals not under our control and which have to do with the choices we actually control. The breadcrumbers' behavior, their text messages, their emotional availability, their perception of your worth, these are ultimate externals. They exist entirely outside of your jurisdiction. When you try to control them, or when you allow your emotional state to be governed by them, you are volunteering for enslavement. You are handing the keys to your internal kingdom to a careless trespasser. Redirecting the gaze means you stop looking out at the barren landscape of their inconsistency, and you turn your supreme attention inward, toward your own internal emotional environment. You begin to observe your own mind with the same intense focus you previously reserved for their digital footprint. When the anxiety arises, when the phantom craving for their validation grips your chest, you do not judge it. You do not panic. You simply observe it. You say, there is the withdrawal. There is the neurochemical craving for the dopamine spike. It is uncomfortable, but it is not dangerous, and it is not a command. You begin to realize that the silence they left behind is not an empty void. It is a canvas. It is a cleared field. The energy that was previously bleeding out of you through the sieve of their indecision is now trapped inside your own walls, waiting to be utilized. This brings us to the monumental shift from being a consumer to becoming a producer. In the dynamic of breadcrumbing, you were fundamentally a consumer. You were emotionally starving, sitting at the table, waiting to consume whatever scraps of validation they decided to brush off their plate. You consumed their texts. You consumed their social media updates. You consumed the vague, hypothetical future they promised, but never delivered. And like a diet, consisting entirely of refined sugar, this consumption spiked your energy temporarily, but left you malnourished, hollow, and continuously hungry. Emotional sovereignty demands that you become a producer. You must transition from consuming external validation to producing your own internal stability. You must manufacture your own neurochemical equilibrium. How do we achieve this practically? We begin by reclaiming the literal mathematics of your time. Think of the hundreds of hours you have spent waiting. The hours spent decoding silence, scrolling through old conversations, checking their online status. That time was stolen from your destiny. We are going to take it back, minute by agonizing minute, and redirect it into high-value personal autonomy. We use a technique called the pattern, interrupt, and redirect. When the obsessive thought of the breadcrumber arises, when your hand reaches for the phone to check if they have miraculously bypassed your mute, you catch the impulse, you interrupt the physical action, and in that exact moment, you pivot that energy into a productive, self-sourced action. If the anxiety tells you to check their profile, you immediately drop to the floor and do 20 push-ups, forcing the cortisol out of your bloodstream through physical exertion. You open a book and read 10 pages of dense, elevating philosophy. You sit at your desk and dedicate 20 minutes to deep, focused work on your career or your passion project. You pick up an instrument. You go for a walk in the sun. You write down 3 things you are intensely grateful for that have absolutely nothing to do with romance. You are systematically retraining your nervous system. You are teaching your brain that it does not need to look outward for a dopamine hit. You can generate a much deeper, more sustainable sense of satisfaction through your own autonomous action. You are producing your own worth. You are building a life that is so structurally sound, so intellectually and physically engaging, that the sudden ping of a text message is no longer the main event of your day. It is merely background noise. As you build this self-sourced architecture, as you invest the energy you used to waste on them directly into the compounding interest of your own evolution, your identity begins to shift. You no longer view yourself as a secondary character in their confusing drama. You step into the role of the undisputed author of your own reality. And as this new identity solidifies, your standards for human connection will undergo a radical, permanent transformation. You will establish an entirely new standard for what constitutes a full meal in a relationship. When you are starving, even a piece of moldy bread looks like a feast. When your self-worth is entirely depleted, a midnight text message containing a single emoji feels like a grand romantic gesture. But as you cultivate radical self-containment, as you fill your own cup until it overflows, you are no longer starving. You are sitting at a magnificent banquet of your own making. You have built a life rich with purpose, deep friendships, physical vitality, and unshakable peace. From this elevated vantage point, the breadcrumbs are no longer appealing. In fact, they become deeply insulting. If someone wishes to pull a chair up to your table, they cannot arrive empty-handed. They must bring a full plate. What does a full meal look like? It looks like consistency. It looks like a person whose words and actions are in perfect, harmonious alignment. It is the absolute absence of confusion. If they say they will call at 6 o'clock, the phone rings at 6 o'clock. If they want to see you, they make a definitive plan, they secure the time, and they show up fully present. A full meal is reciprocal effort. It is knowing exactly where you stand in someone's life without ever having to ask, decode, or investigate. It is the deep, grounding safety of emotional availability. There is a profound, unshakable peace that emerges when your mood is no longer dictated by a notification. It is a quiet, powerful stillness. Your nervous system, finally freed from the exhausting highs and lows of the dopamine casino, returns to its natural, regulated baseline. You sleep deeply. Your mind is sharp and focused. You walk through the world with a relaxed confidence, knowing that your emotional well-being is securely locked inside your own chest, entirely impervious to the flaky, inconsistent behavior of others. When you reach this state of emotional sovereignty, you will look back at the breadcrumber, and you will not feel anger. You will not feel resentment. You will certainly not feel a lingering romantic longing. You will feel a profound, calm indifference. The illusion has been completely dismantled. You will see their behavior not as a mysterious puzzle to be solved, but as a boring, highly predictable habit of a person who simply lacks the depth, maturity, and capacity to meet you where you are. They are a shallow puddle, and you, my friend, are an ocean. You cannot shrink your vastness to fit into their limitations. The mystery evaporates, leaving only the mundane reality of their low investment. And in that realization, you are fundamentally, permanently free. You have reclaimed your power. You have starved the distraction to feed your focus. You have transformed the agonizing trap of their silence into the magnificent catalyst for your own profound elevation. The waiting is over. Your life, in all its sovereign glory, belongs entirely to you once again. Thank you for walking this path with me today. Thank you for having the courage to look into the shadows and reclaim the light that has always belonged to you. If this message resonated with your spirit, if it helped you break a chain or see a truth you were previously blind to, I ask that you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Join our community here at the Elevated Within. We will continue to build this sanctuary together, exploring the depths of our minds and the boundless potential of our sovereignty. Until our minds meet again, protect your peace, elevate your standards, and never, ever accept crumbs when you were born for the feast. Farewell.